Welcome, listeners, to the Bug's Labyrinth, where I will guide you through the maze of secrets that make up our world. I am your host. You can call me the Bug if you must call me anything. A list of all applicable trigger warnings have been provided in the episode notes of every episode. If any topics are of any concern to you, please take care of yourself and skip this episode. We'll be right here for you next time. So, welcome to the Labyrinth. I will be your guide. The Trailhead Chaser. Entity Classification ID TCIM-01. Status of Entity. Identified. Classification of Entity. Creature. First instance of Entity. 2001. Date of Event. October 21st, 2012. Date of Statement. November 8th, 2012. Victim of Event. Karen West. Assumed Awe. The Uncanny. My therapist told me that taking walks would be one of the best ways to help my mental health. I mean, we spend so much time indoors, it makes sense. Of course, you hear that a lot. A walk and some fresh air will make you feel so much better, but how much could it actually help? Well, as it turns out, it can help a lot. The days I end up going on a walk, I feel 10 times better than the days that I don't. Not only that, but I found out the more nature I see, the better I feel. So I started taking up hiking on the weekends or holidays so I could truly lose myself in nature. It's peaceful up there, in the mountains. Even with it being crowded or busy, I love it. I mean, the only times I could make it out were the same times everyone else could, so it was rare that I was up there alone. I really didn't mind it, though. I've always been on the more introverted side, but the people you tend to find on the trails are some of the nicest you'll ever meet. I never end the hike alone. At some point or another, I get picked up by a group, or I try to keep pace with some old lady in much better shape than I am. Those people fill the air, like no moment with them is empty. Anyway, it was getting close to the end of October when well, you know. I loved hiking in the fall. The way the mountains filled with those vivid oranges and reds and yellows. It's breathtaking. It hardly feels real when you make your way to a ledge and see the valley of fiery aspen trees below. I could sit up there for hours, the cold breeze on my face, the sun shining down. It was a particularly hard summer. Hot and crowded, and I couldn't get nearly as much time out as I would have liked, so I went up early that Sunday morning so I could make a day of wandering the woods. I was planning on taking Brown's Trailhead and Wimbley Canyon. It was out of the way enough so that I knew I would be fairly alone, but not so far that it would take me hours to get back down after dark. That's the part of the mountains I hated. The darkness up there, it's unlike anything you can find in the city. Because it isn't just dark in the mountains. As soon as the sun sets, you become acutely aware of how big those woods are, how much unclaimed land there is around you, the cover the darkness gives the animals searching for their next meal, the way the deer look at you when you shine a light in their eyes. It was emptier than I thought it would be when I got to the trail. The trailhead was surrounded by campsites and this little offshoot of the river the kids love to play in. It wasn't cold enough yet to ward off people weary of the snow, and the sun was shining so brightly in the cloudless sky, but I only saw one other car in the lot. An old Camry, I think. Dark blue and starting to rust around the wheel wells and doors. I only remembered it because I wondered how a car like that had made the drive. The road up the canyon starts paved and proper, of course, but the higher you get up, the more difficult the terrain, the more narrow the roads. So I was surprised a car like that had made it all the way without slipping or getting stuck. I have the newest Jeep model. My husband got it for our anniversary this year. Nonetheless, I started up the trail. It was a crisp 30 or so degrees, and I was enjoying the sharp sting I got every time I breathed in and the steam my breath gave off when I breathed out. There's a rhythm you get into when you hike, especially when you do it enough. It's almost meditative. You stop thinking about the sounds your steps make or how hard you're breathing, and you start to focus on the sounds of the wind in the leaves or the way the birds sing. So, you would imagine my surprise when about half a mile in I started hearing footsteps. I didn't notice at first, since I believed it was just my own walking echoing in the trees, but it was ever so slightly off, like someone was trying to keep in step with me, as if to keep their own noise hidden. So without stopping, I glanced behind me to see if there was anyone there. I almost screamed in surprise when I saw him. I'd convinced myself there was nothing wrong, so when I actually saw a figure, I was shocked to say the least. I laughed at myself, of course. I had seen the car in the lot, and part of me must have known that there was someone else out there, and I'm sure it put me on edge. I apologized for getting scared, but he didn't move. He didn't laugh or smile. It was then that I noticed how wide his eyes were open. But it wasn't like he was forcing them open, just that they were always like that. They were blue, a deep, icy blue like a husky, and his face was odd somehow, like it was incomplete, off in some manner. Maybe his eyebrows were too light for how dark his hair was, or his lips ended at an unnatural point, or his skin was almost paper white, like there was no blood in his veins. I really hate to point out the odd features in others, but you need to understand how unsettled I was. He was wearing a black hoodie and dark denim jeans. Nothing close to the usual style you'd see on hikers this high up, but his boots were solid, so I assumed he was just here for a quick hike, something quick to start a Sunday. I laughed awkwardly and apologized to him again, but he didn't even blink. His wide blue eyes glued to mine. I tried to tell him to go ahead of me. I don't know if he couldn't hear me or what, but he still didn't move. He was so tall. His arms were so long, his knees bent in just the wrong spot on his legs. I was determined not to let him ruin the day I had planned for myself, so I apologized again before turning around and continuing on my path. Of course, I kept a close eye on him. It was hard not to. I heard him walking behind me, mimicking my steps almost exactly. But whenever I turned around to look at him, he was completely still. And the odd thing was, it wasn't like he was standing straight up or looking like someone who was just walking along and stopped mid-step. He was posed in this exaggerated way, like someone pretending to be sneaking around. His front foot was high in the air in a cartoony arch. One arm was fully outstretched in front of him like he was trying to grab me, and the other had a bony, too long white finger on his lips, hushing me. You must think I was crazy for continuing as if he wasn't there, but no matter how unsettled I was, I couldn't bring myself to pass him to leave. The only way to continue was to move forward, and as long as he stayed a few feet away from me, I thought I would be fine. I thought it was some kind of prank, some new trend the kids were doing. I wasn't going to give him the reaction he wanted. Somehow, I began to enjoy my hike again. The trees were just so beautiful, and the air felt so fresh. It took me a while to notice the footsteps were no longer behind me. I turned around, and sure enough, he was gone. I felt a wash of relief come over me before I realized now I couldn't see him. I couldn't see him, and now he could be anywhere in the woods, waiting, watching, and I had no idea. My heart rate skyrocketed, and I had the uncontrollable need to get back to my car and drive as far away from that place as I could. I started to look around to see if I could place him among the trees, and when I turned back around, I fell to the ground as he was now only inches from my face. His mouth was twisted in a horrific grin as if it were being pulled by the edges with string. I screamed, of course. Who wouldn't? I still hadn't seen the bastard move, so how could he have gotten in front of me so quickly? His face, it looked like a mask from so close up. Like his skin was made of silicone. But I swear to you it wasn't. He was flesh and blood. He had to be. I got up to my feet as quickly as I could, and I ran. I ran as fast as I could, but I was running downhill, so I was doing everything I could not to slip and fall. Eventually, I got up the courage to look behind me. I regret that. He was running after me. His long, spindly legs arching as if he had too many joints, and the speed was impossible. All the while, his arms were outstretched in front of him, his long fingers opening and closing, trying to grasp me. That terrifying plastic smile grew wider on his cheeks. It was the morning when I left my house. It was the morning when I started up that trail. I can't explain to you how, but as I ran, the sun set around me fast. I was no more than a mile down the trail, and the sun had set like I was watching a time-lapse. I started screaming then. I don't know who would have heard me, but I screamed, and I screamed until my throat went hoarse, but I didn't stop screaming. I could hear noises from all around me. Twigs snapping, leaves rustling, footsteps coming at me from all around. If I didn't know any better, I would have told you I was being surrounded by those things, but every time I turned to look behind me, it was only him, and just as far away as he always had been. I don't know how long I ran, but I knew that thing was only toying with me. With speed like that, it could have caught up and killed me in a matter of seconds, but for whatever reason, it wanted me to run. Just scream to be scared, and believe me, I was. I had never felt terror like that before. Eventually, it was like I broke through something. I was determined to make it back to my car, and with one last push, I made it to the parking lot. It was near pitch black and completely empty, but I knew if I could get to my car, I would be safe. Somehow, I managed to unlock the door, get inside, and lock it before it could reach me. And as I turned the key to start the car, I looked up and watched it leap onto my hood and start slamming its white bony fists into my windshield. I screamed, and it started to open its mouth. I say open its mouth because it's the best way I have to describe what it did. What it actually did was tilt the top of its head back as if it were on a hinge, opening its mouth like a lid to a gaping hole that was too big and impossibly deep. It started to make a sound I can only assume was screaming. No, not screaming. Laughing. Like someone who's only been told what laughing sounds like, but have never heard it themselves. It sounded like wet meat slapping against a metal pipe, a sound no human or creature alive should have been able to make. That's when I turned the engine on and floored it. I didn't know where I was going or what I could do to stop this nightmare, but I pressed on the gas pedal as hard as I could, and when I opened my eyes, I was in the emergency room. From what I've been told, park rangers found me not long after the accident. I had driven headfirst into a tree, totaling the car and nearly killing me in the process. The rangers didn't mention any hooded figures or plastic creatures, only that I was in a bad way and screaming about something they couldn't see. They just figured it was trauma from the head wound. I haven't been hiking since then, if you can believe it. Haven't left the house much either. There have been several reports of entity TCIM-01 along the Browns Trailhead in Montana. Institute staff have tried on multiple occasions to detain entity TCIM-01, but no attempts have been successful. It seems as if it likes the chase. An unidentified liquid was found on the front and hood of Miss West's car, resembling blood, but it was later found to be fake blood from a party company, along with fist-sized cracks in the windshield. Montana officials will not allow the burning of Brown's Trailhead. Monitoring of the area continues. Who called me? Mr. Weathers? Weird. I'll call him back. Thank you for listening to The Bug's Labyrinth. The Bug's Labyrinth is an Amsel TV production. This episode was written, recorded, directed, and edited by Amsel T. Vance. Manuscripts were edited by Avery K. Rayner. Audio consultant, Dani B. Places and names have been changed for the privacy of all involved. Safety is the most important thing to us, and we will never compromise that. Follow us on Twitter @BugsLabyrinth for updates and if you need to contact us. Rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts. It's the best way to help us out and get our story out there. And support our Patreon to help us keep making cool stuff. Until next time, stay safe, listeners.